When it comes to Westerns, few films loom as large or as strange as Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time in the West. Often hailed as a cinematic masterpiece, it's a movie that feels less like a simple story of cowboys and gunslingers and more like a sweeping opera carved into the dusty frontier. With its glacial pacing, iconic score by Ennio Morricone, and unforgettable performances from Henry Fonda, Claudia Cardinale, Charles Bronson, and Jason Robards, the film has earned its place as one of the greatest Westerns ever made. But beneath its reputation for grandeur lies a treasure chest of oddities, secrets, and behind-the-scenes quirks that make this movie even more fascinating than most fans realize. For starters, did you know that Leone originally wanted to quit Westerns entirely and only returned when Paramount gave him an unprecedented deal? Or that Henry Fonda, America's symbol of decency, was told to shave his mustache, dye his beard, and wear bright blue contact lenses, so that audiences would be utterly shocked when he committed cold-blooded murder in the opening act? And while the haunting harmonica theme has become iconic, the sound wasn't created with a normal instrument at all. It was custom-built and intentionally designed to sound eerie and unsettling. Then there's the trivia that sounds almost too strange to be true. Jason Robards only landed his role after another actor was arrested. The opening train station sequence took 3 days to film for just 10 minutes of screen time, and the fly crawling on Jack Elam's face gag was never planned, it just happened, and Leone loved it. Yes, Once Upon a Time in the West is a masterpiece, but it's also a film stitched together from happy accidents, bizarre decisions, and production experiments that no one else would have dared. So let's see the 20 weird facts in detail. Leone almost refused to make another Western after The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, until an irresistible offer. After finishing The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly in 1966, Sergio Leone seriously considered retiring from Westerns. He felt he had expressed everything he wanted through that genre, and was more interested in moving towards something different. He had encountered the novel The Hoods by Harry Gray, a pseudonym, which he planned to adapt. This would eventually become Once Upon a Time in America, released in 1984. Despite his intention not to return to Western settings, Hollywood studios kept pressing him, offering Western projects. United Artists approached him with an offer to make a film starring big names like Charlton Heston, Kirk Douglas, and Rock Hudson, but Leone rejected that. What changed was when Paramount Pictures offered him a generous budget plus access to Henry Fonda, whom Leone considered a favorite actor and had wanted to work with for a long time. That deal persuaded him to accept a Western once more. Leone then brought in young screenwriters Bernardo Bertolucci and Dario Argento to help develop the treatment. During the late 1966 through 1967 period, he had them and himself study many classic American Westerns, such as High Noon, The Searchers, in long viewings at his house to build the plot around homage and also subversion. Leone thus returned to the direction of a big Western because the financial resources, the actor he truly wanted, and enough creative freedom aligned. What had seemed like a swan song to his Western period became perhaps his most ambitious Western yet. In a 1987 interview by American Suburb X, Leone said, "I had never thought of making a Western even as I was making it. I think that my films are Westerns only in their exterior aspects. Within them are some of my truths, which happily I see belong to lots of parts of the world, not just America." Henry Fonda was told to shave his mustache and show his blue eyes. Henry Fonda's casting as the cold-blooded Frank remains one of the most daring moves in film history. Known for embodying upright characters, Fonda was the last actor audiences expected to see gunning down a child in cold blood. Sergio Leone knew this and set out to weaponize Fonda's wholesome image. When the actor arrived in Rome, he had prepared to look villainous. He wore brown contact lenses and a mustache, hoping the disguise would help him slip into the role. Leone immediately rejected the idea. As Fonda recalled, "I showed up with brown contacts and a mustache. Leone looked at me and said, 'No, I want those blue eyes. I want the audience to recognize them and then be shocked when you kill a boy.'" That creative decision made the opening massacre unforgettable. Fonda admitted it was a departure that felt both exhilarating and risky. In later interviews, he reflected on how strange it was to play against type, explaining, "I had always been the good guy. Here I was, walking into a role where the first thing I do is kill a child. It was a challenge, but Leone convinced me that was the point. Leone's insistence that the performance be delivered without makeup or heavy disguises turned Fonda's natural look into the film's most unsettling weapon. Film historians note that this single choice redefined the actor's career and deepened the moral complexity of Leone's Western. Instead of hiding behind a caricature, Frank became terrifying because he looked familiar. The piercing blue eyes Leone fought for became the symbol of a corrupted innocence, a face audiences thought they could trust, transformed into something chilling. Leone scored Once Upon a Time in the West before shooting and played it on set. Long before the cameras rolled, Sergio Leone made a bold decision about the film's music that set Once Upon a Time in the West apart from almost every other Western of its time. He commissioned Ennio Morricone to compose the complete score before principal photography began. Leone believed that the film's rhythm, the actors' movements, and the pacing of each scene would be richer if the music were already alive during production. Morricone's compositions thus informed Leone's shots, the length of silences, and when sounds like wind whistling or distant train wheels should dominate the audio landscape. Leone later said in interviews, "I like to have the music and the images together from the start so that silence becomes part of the music and music part of silence." This is confirmed in production notes and in retrospective analyses. By doing this, Leone created a dynamic relationship between image, sound, and silence, in which the film opens with almost no traditional score, only natural sounds, until Frank first appears. The opening station scene features windmills squeaking, grasshoppers buzzing, telegraph clacks and creaking wood, but not orchestral strings or brass until Frank enters playing his own chord of menace. Morricone, in later talks, reflected on how unusual it was to deliver a score so early and then have to restrain its power during filming. He said, "It is harder to hold back the score when you know how beautiful it is, but Sergio always said less is more." Critics have since noted that this technique gives the film a breathing space that magnifies every note, every silence, every rustle of a boot or blade of grass, and thus builds tension in a way that no post-scored Western ever quite managed. Jason Robards was cast as Cheyenne after another actor's troubles and through a shift in tone. Jason Robards' role as Manuel Cheyenne Gutierrez in Once Upon a Time in the West came about under unusual circumstances that reflected both Leone's storytelling instincts and the unpredictable nature of film casting. According to multiple sources, Robards wasn't the first name attached to the outlaw Cheyenne. Original plans included actors who, for various reasons, scheduling conflicts or off-screen problems, did not pan out. Ultimately, Leone settled on Robards, an actor known more for his stage work and character acting than Western heroics. In interviews, Robards reflected on the oddity of his casting, saying, "I was surprised they asked me to play Cheyenne because I always thought of myself as more dramatic than action or frontier types." He added that shooting Cheyenne's scenes felt like stepping into myth, isolating exile but also forbidden redemption. Some of the decisions around his character were made very deliberately by Leone. Cheyenne is not simply a gunslinger, he is haunted by what he was made to become, often stepping just to the edges of conflict rather than charging headlong into it. Cinematographer Tonino Delicali, in his recollections, also noted how Leone used Cheyenne's physicality and the way Robards carried himself to contrast him with Charles Bronson's harmonica. Colley explained that Leone would often frame Cheyenne slightly off-center or let the camera linger on the shame or nostalgia in Robards' eyes rather than the danger in his gun arm. "Leone wanted you to feel Cheyenne's regrets as much as his resolve," Colley said in Shooting a Masterpiece when discussing how Robards' performance shaped the emotional heart of the film. The train station scene happened almost silently, letting natural sound do the heavy lifting. One of the most audacious moments in Once Upon a Time in the West comes before Henry Fonda even appears. Three gunmen wait at a desolate train station, time stretches, flies buzz, windmills squeak, distant train whistles pierce the air, but there is no orchestral score, nothing to cue you apart from what you see and what you hear. Sergio Leone composed the score before filming began and had Ennio Morricone's music ready. Yet, he made the deliberate choice to withhold it in that opening scene, using natural sounds and the diegetic harmonica to build tension. Leone later explained that he wanted the audience to feel uneasy while anticipating without being guided by music at that moment. In interviews and production notes, he said, "Except for about a minute of the judgment motif, no soundtrack music is played until the end of the second scene when Fonda makes his first entry. That choice magnified every creaking wood plank, every bird flapping its wings, every snapping twig underfoot, the ambient ambiance becoming a character in itself." Cinematographer Tonino Delle Colli also recalled Leone's precision in capturing these sounds, his framing, and his insistence on letting silence stretch because sound becomes anticipation. In Once Upon a Time in the West, shooting a masterpiece, Colli reflected how those early moments made the viewer feel as if the station itself was watching as much as the characters were. Film scholars analyzing the original version note that this absence of music for such a long stretch was nearly sacrilegious for a Western in 1968. Yet, it works to force the audience to lean forward, waiting for the score to erupt and for violence to arrive. The little train station scene took 4 days to shoot. Sergio Leone was famous for his patience and an eagle eye for detail. Nowhere is that more evident than in the little station scene at the start of the movie. The scene in question shows 3 gunmen waiting under a stark sky by a train station named Cattle Corner, and nothing much happens for a long time until tension builds and the scene culminates in a sudden burst of violence. According to script supervisors and interviews with crew member Mickey Knox, the entire little station scene took 4 days. Knox said that the drop of water falling on Woody's head was shot over 2 to 3 hours, but the overall pacing of framing the station, the behavior of the gunman, even capturing flies, and the wind took time to get right. Cinematographer Tonino Delle Colli, an American cinematographer, recalls Leone insisting on many takes to capture every tiny detail so that by the time the gunshots ring out, the audience feels that they have been breathing the station's dust and hearing its ambient creaks. The production notes show that the location was Ghost Railway Station in La Calahorra, near Guadix in Spain, and that time was allocated for the station scenes over 4 days to achieve the rhythmic pacing Leone wanted. Mickey Knox also said that it was one of the last scenes shot in Spain and we filmed it 3 weeks before we finished. The length of time was not a waste but an intention. Every twitch of grass, every fly that landed, every roll of a train wheel was weighted. So when silence finally breaks, violence feels raw. Claudia Cardinale was dubbing from the very beginning, and her voice was dubbed by others. Claudia Cardinale's performance as Jill McBain is unforgettable, yet much of what people hear in the international version of Once Upon a Time in the West is not her own voice. Because of her French-Tunisian accent, and because many cast members were speaking different languages on set, Cardinale at times delivered lines in Italian, English, or phonetic approximations, which would later be replaced in post-production, according to sources. In the English dub, for example, many of her lines are spoken by another actress, Joyce Gordon. At the same time, Gabriele Ferzetti and Jack Elam also had voice actors substituting for their original voices in some markets. Cardinale herself has spoken about this in interviews. She remembers arriving on set and being asked to ensure she didn't lose her identity, even when dubbed, saying, "When I arrived for my first movie, I couldn't speak a word. I was speaking in French, in fact, I was dubbed." In Italy magazine, she described Leone's method. He would have the music composed before the shooting started. He would get us to listen to the score before filming the scene. This shows how Leone was already thinking in the layers of production, including dubbing, sound music, and acting, even before filming began, rather than leaving sound entirely for post-production. Cardinale also reflected on how the dubbing did not lessen the performance for her role as Jill McBain. She said that she focused on the eye's expression and posture so that even without her own voice, the emotion could come through. Critics later pointed out that despite the dubbing, her performance remains emotionally strong due to that physical presence and emotional clarity. The iconic fly on Jack Elam's face was hard-won. One of the smallest moments in Once Upon a Time in the West becomes one of the most unforgettable. Jack Elam sits quietly at the desolate train station as flies buzz around him. One fly lands on his beard, then crawls upward until Elam traps it inside the barrel of his gun. That moment of irritation turned spectacle was not choreographed cheaply or faked easily. According to Elam himself, Working with Sergio Leone took patience, cunning, and trial to capture that insect on camera. In a later interview, Elam described how they tried using a fake fly first, but it looked false on camera, so they went to more natural methods. He said, "We smeared apricot jam from the lunch table on my beard thinking it would attract flies. Well, they came to my beard, but they would not go where I could catch them. Then he smeared honey in my beard. No luck. One afternoon we broke and there was some watermelon on the set. He spread some watermelon on me, millions of flies came, and I caught a fly." Production reports corroborate that jars of flies were kept off camera, and the crew released flies one at a time, hoping one would land in just the right spot. This chase for a real fly rather than something mechanical underscores Leone's obsession with authenticity, even in the smallest moments. Every texture of Elam's beard, every flicker of insect movement, every glint of realization in his eye was earned through many takes, trying to capture not just the image, but the insect's restless life. Film historians note that this one bug drives home Leone's theme of tension, waiting for violence that builds not only in score or dialogue, but simply in living detail. The harmonica theme was designed as a duel between melodies and the man behind it. Ennio Morricone's theme for The Man with a Harmonica is more than just music for Charles Bronson's character. It acts like a storytelling tool that reveals the spirit of Once Upon a Time in the West. Morricone created 3 main themes in the film, one for harmonica, one for Frank, and one for Jill. These themes are mixed together, sometimes sharing musical elements to highlight the connection between harmonica and Frank. Harmonica's music is always played on a harmonica, while Frank's threatening presence is shown through electric guitar or strings. When their themes overlap, it adds a tense, dark feeling. Morricone said that composing the score was challenging because he wanted to hold back so the music wouldn't overpower the film. Director Sergio Leone believed less was more. The score was written before filming began and played during production, allowing Leone to plan the shots and timing around the music. The soundtrack was a huge success, selling about 10 million copies worldwide, showing just how powerful the themes were. Harmonica's melody is layered with natural sounds like wind, water, and creaking wood, creating the film's unique tension. Researchers note that when harmonica first plays his tune, it brings a sense of revenge and mystery. The melody appears early, even before Frank shows up, preparing the audience for the story of past wrongs to come. The American version was heavily cut, losing key scenes and characters. The version of Once Upon a Time in the West that most U.S. audiences first saw was significantly shorter than Sergio Leone's full vision. According to documentation and sources, Paramount cut the film down to about 140 minutes for its U.S. theatrical release from its original Italian version length of about 171 minutes. In doing so, several scenes were excised entirely, including the entire trading post scene starring Lionel Stander. Hence, Cheyenne's introduction in America begins later in other versions. Also, a conversation between Morton and Frank regarding Jill at the Navajo Cliffs was shortened, and some of Morton's death scene was reduced. Most drastically, Cheyenne's death scene was removed completely in the U.S. cut. Sergio Leone and editor Nino Baragli, in interviews and retrospectives, expressed frustration with this version. Film historians and scholars have quoted Leone as considering the U.S. cut not representative of his work. Leone's daughter Rafaela said in print that her father often dismissed the American theatrical version as not really his movie because of those omissions. Cinematographer Tonino Delicali asked in American Cinematographer, shooting a masterpiece, about how certain scenes visually built Cheyenne's character, only to see those scenes vanish in some cuts, making the narrative less coherent. The alterations affected pacing but also deeply shifted some character arcs, particularly Cheyenne's, because without his death scene in the trading post, his arc seemed truncated. Restorations in later home media released versions internationally reinstated many of those scenes, bringing them closer to Leone's intent. Leone, Argento, and Bertolucci built the story by studying classic westerns and turning their meanings inside out. Sergio Leone asked 2 very young cinephiles, Dario Argento and Bernardo Bertolucci, to help him craft a western led by a woman, and they began with an unusual method. They watched and re-watched American westerns together, then wrote a long, free treatment full of images and references rather than a dialogue-heavy script. Argento recalled the process in his own words. He said, "Bernardo and I studied many films over 3 or 4 months. The ones with female leads, like Johnny Guitar, were important. But we were not working on a script. It was a treatment. It was very long, very free, full of ideas, dreams, and descriptions. It was full of fantasies. And then Sergio and Sergio Donati turned our work into a screenplay." Leone played Cardinale's character music on set before her scenes. Claudia Cardinale recalls a detail from her work on Once Upon a Time in the West that many viewers may never notice, yet it adds a subtle emotional layering to her performance. In an interview, she said, "Leone used a very sweet and intelligent trick with me. Every time I was going to recite a scene, he put on my music, the music of my character. This was more than mere mood setting. It was part of Leone's method of fusing character and score so that Cardinale's actions reflect the musical identity he assigned her. Using her music ahead of the camera made Cardinale's performance feel anchored even when the sound was minimal, or when her voice would, in some versions, be dubbed. As she said, 'It helps.' For many scenes, her eyes and posture respond to an invisible score she can hear while the audience first senses it, only when the full orchestra comes in." The film was shot across Europe and America to mix real landscapes and studio craft 0.25-0.30. Once Upon a Time in the West took shape through the weaving of real deserts, rugged valleys, and carefully constructed studio sets in several countries, achieving the perfect blend of isolation, vastness, and myth. Sergio Leone and his crew shot for about 2.5 months in the Tabernas Desert of Almeria and near Guadix in the province of Granada in Spain. They then moved to interiors in Rome at Cinecittà Studios for approximately 6 weeks before undertaking location work in Monument Valley, Arizona for a couple of weeks. The location, called Cattle Corner Station, the ghost railway station in La Calahorra near Guadix, provided the setting for the opening scene with the 3 gunmen waiting for the train, which was filmed on site in the desert under a burning sun with real wind and dust blowing through the tracks and behind them. Leone chose these locations to combine natural harshness, beauty, and silence with the visual poetry the film demands. There is no verified source saying the sound of the train was layered with animal growls. Many fans believe that the train in Once Upon a Time in the West was made more menacing by mixing in animal growls to its sound design. It's often repeated online in pop culture trivia or fan forums that Leone's sound engineers distorted animal noises under the rumble of the train to make it sound alive or monstrous. However, this claim does not appear in any verified interview with Sergio Leone and Ennio Morricone or the sound crew, nor in trustworthy production notes. Film scholars who have published work on Leone's use of sound make no mention of animal growls in the train sound. They do, however, highlight how much Leone relied on ambient noise, wind creaks, wheels creaking, and the tension of silence and music interplay to build atmosphere. Leone's giant camera moves and the love for the Chapman crane.
In his westerns, going back.
Sergio Leone wanted the camera to feel like a living thing that could float, stalk, and suddenly pounce, and his crew built the film around that idea. Cinematographer Tonino Delli recalled the director's obsession with big, graceful moves. He said Sergio loved the Chapman crane. When he saw one, it made him happy, and he would get up on the Chapman and never come down. The opening rail platform was even engineered for unusual angles. Production photos and notes show that the team cut openings into the station decking so the lens could peer up through the boards and then rise into those famous Leone faces, as if the platform itself were breathing. Leone also pursued scale with stubborn precision. Delli remembered that in Almeria, Sergio even had 2 kilometers of railway built and arranged for the locomotive and wagons to be transported to the canyon location. When he had made up his mind about something like that, it was impossible to change it. What those choices did on screen was give Jill's arrival and the station's set pieces a sense of symphonic motion. The camera seems to swoop from the grit at a boot heel to the vast sky and back into an unblinking close-up, all while time stretches. Delli explained that Leone would start the day with a wide lens and finish with a big close-up, perfecting the rhythm over very long days because every small move mattered when it was cut together. Film historian Christopher Frayling has often described how these moves were the visual grammar that turned an homage-filled Western into something operatic and new, a ballet of steel and wind and faces that you do not forget. Leone took dozens of takes with Bronson because every moment had to feel like silence. Charles Bronson's portrayal of harmonica is famously stoic and minimal, yet it was built from a grueling process of repetition and refinement. According to cinematographer Tonino Delle Colli in Once Upon a Time in the West, shooting a masterpiece, Leone pushed Bronson and the rest of the cast through many takes for each scene until the precise posture of Bronson's face, the way he held the harmonica, and the stillness around him felt entirely right. Colli said he would do many takes. He wasn't the sort of director to do just 2 takes because he would perfect a take while he was shooting. Bronson later spoke in print about how Leone insisted that a scene involving harmonica waiting by the train could not be done until the light hit the barrel of the gun just so, and until Bronson's breathing was imperceptible. Bronson said, "You know, Charles Bronson was comfortable not speaking, but that moment when you do speak must carry everything," which underscores why those silent takes mattered so much. Jill is the center of the film, and Sergio Leone said so in unmistakable words. Sergio Leone built the entire fable around Claudia Cardinale's Jill, and he said it openly. In one interview, he puts it this way: "You see, in Once Upon a Time in the West, the whole film moves around her. If you take her out, there is no more film. She is the central motor of the entire happening." That declaration is not a flourish. It is the map for how the story breathes. Leone frames Jill like the horizon that everything crosses, and he times the camera to her rhythm, not just to gunfire and revenge. That is why the film grants her the epic entrance at the depot. That is why the town watches her. And that is why the 3 men orbit her like fate. Film historian Christopher Frayling has often noted that the tapestry of references that Leone, Argento, and Bertolucci wove only becomes truly new when it funnels through Jill's journey from widow to builder of the future. The script took months of treatment before any final draft was written. We've noted how Sergio Leone worked with young writers, Bernardo Bertolucci and Dario Argento, on a treatment rather than a full screenplay. This treatment phase lasted several months, during which they watched classic westerns, sketched ideas, and built imagery before any scene-by-scene script was set in stone. According to Argento, he said, "Bernardo and I studied many films over 3 or 4 months, and described the work they did as a treatment very long, very free, full of ideas, dreams, and descriptions that Leone and Sergio Donati turned into screenplay form." Film scholars have observed that the lengthy treatment phase allowed Leone to build the film's structure around a silent landscape and music, rather than relying solely on dialogue. It is also said that this process gave Cardinale, Bronson, Fonda, and Robards room to inhabit their characters rather than simply recite lines. Clint Eastwood turned down harmonica after Leone's ultra-slow pitch. Clint Eastwood was the first star Sergio Leone approached for the mysterious Avenger, later played by Charles Bronson, but the offer unraveled in a meeting that revealed how different their tempos had become. Eastwood recalled that Leone began his pitch by describing the wordless station prologue in painstaking detail, lingering on the bit where a gunman battles a fly. In Eastwood's words, "It took him 15 minutes to get past that part, and I remember asking, 'Wait a second, where are we heading with this?'" Leone was not to be hurried and continued his synopsis at his own overly detailed pace. Eastwood later summed up the project as just another pasta dish and passed, a decision that opened the door for Bronson's elemental performance. That account matches the broader picture painted by historians of Leone's method at the time. He wanted an almost operatic Western paced by silence and ritual, and he had already decided to build the film's rhythm around pre-written music and long takes, a creative approach that made sense to him but sounded like a test of patience to an actor coming off 3 whirlwind successes. The refusal also shows how cannily Leone pivoted. He had long admired Bronson, and once the Eastwood route closed, he leaned into a harder, more weathered presence and let Morricone's harmonica cry carry the character's mystery. The result is a different electricity than an Eastwood version would have offered, and it begins with that awkward pitch session that never found a shared beat. The tragic side story of Al Muloch's suicide on location and Leone's immediate response. Al Muloch played the role of one of the gunmen at the train station in Once Upon a Time in the West. In the final days of shooting, Muloch jumped from a hotel room balcony in Almeria, Spain, in what was later reported as a suicide attempt. According to screenwriter Mickey Knox and production manager Claudio Mancini, who witnessed part of the aftermath, Muloch survived the fall, but suffered severe injuries, including a pierced lung from broken ribs. In the chaos that followed, Sergio Leone reportedly shouted, "Get the costume, we need the costume," as the crew scrambled to preserve continuity of shots involving Mulach's character. The moment is both horrible and cinematic in its own way, and many crew members later reflected that Leone's reaction was brutal yet practical. One recollection from Tonino Delle Colli in shooting a masterpiece noted that while everyone was shocked and deeply affected, Leone still maintained a director's mind in that moment, caring about the integrity of the film. Mulach's incident is often left out of the popular telling of the film, perhaps because it feels too raw. Yet the fact that filming continued, immediate costuming decisions were made, and shots preserved, underscores both Leone's rigor and the fragility of life behind the camera. Once Upon a Time in the West is remembered as Sergio Leone's most operatic Western, yet the stories behind its creation reveal something even richer. From Henry Fonda's piercing blue eyes to Claudia Cardinale's secret dubbing, the film is built on strange accidents and bold choices. Every odd detail adds weight to its mythic quality. What emerged was not only a Western but a cinematic ritual, turning landscapes and faces into legend. Behind the masterpiece lies 100 small risks that made it unforgettable. What can you say about the movie? Share your thoughts in the comments. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe.